Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about line plots. And if you recall, we were working on line plots with our March green pencils when we left school in March. This is an example of the line plot we did as a 5th grade class. And you can see that it's the pencil lengths in inches, and the dots represent each person's pencil. In this case, we colored the dots by homeroom classes, and that tells us how many pencils or whatever length we choose. So if we choose the ones that were 7 inches, we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people had 7-inch pencils after the first week of using them. So that's what we're going to create today, and then you're going to try some on your own. There's an activity for you to do and a line plot for you to make with the data we collected about how many pillows are on your bed and what is the length of your thumbnail finger. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Right now we're just going to look at some new data. This data, I wanted to find out about how many eggs our chickens laid each day for 2 weeks. And so I had an egg collection per day in a 2-week period. And each day of the week, we wrote down how many eggs were collected, and we kept them in the chart. And so now we're going to make a line plot, which I also want to remind you is also called a dot plot. Some people call it a dot plot, others call it a line plot. And the first thing that you have to do is you have to organize the data, because if you want to find out how many of each response there is, looking at something like this might be a little bit difficult. So what I did is I just did a quick chart. So when you're doing it, it doesn't have to be beautiful. Line plot, we want to be really neat and accurate, but just collecting this and organizing it doesn't have to be so great. And so I just went through and I wrote down, I could see that I had, the lowest number I had was 3 and the highest I had was 15, so I just wrote them down this way. And now I'm just gonna go. There's 1 for 9, 1 for 6, another 1 for 9, 1 for 3, 1 for 4, another 1 for 9, 1 for 5, another 1 for 3. Wow, that was a big day. We're gonna go all the way down to 15, and then 10, and then they're back to laying 6, another 1 for 9, and then 2 for 7. So now, in order to make sure that I have all my pieces of data and I didn't forget any, I know that in 2 weeks, there's 14 days, so I should have 14 check marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have the correct number of check marks, and I'm also going to write, just so I can get a visual here, how many there are in each day, because that is what my line plot is actually going to show. Okay, now I want to look at the range of data. That is the difference between the lowest and the highest. And I see that my data goes from 3 to 15. And that's going to help us when we start putting out and designing our line plot. And then I don't know if you remember this word, and I'm not sure if we have it in our vocabulary folders, but the interval of the plot are the even spaces that are between each of the numbers. So that's something that we have to decide. It's pretty clear what we're gonna do on this, but you have to look. Do you want intervals of 1? Do you want intervals of 2? On some graphs you might have intervals of 5. But on your line plot, your intervals always have to be even. And in this case, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to do intervals of 1. it's because our range of data isn't that big that we have to cut it down, and you wouldn't do intervals of 5 because you wouldn't clearly see where the eggs are. So in this case, our interval is going to be 1. That means on our line plot, it's going to go from 1 to 15. Okay, I'm going to move our data over, but still try to keep it in the camera so that we can see what we're doing. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to keep it. This is the area that we're going to need the most. Looking at that, if I have to move it over, I will. And now I'm going to put up my line, or my line plot. Now I have marked it off already, but that is something that you're going to have to figure out when you go to do it. Put this here. Okay. And so, remembering that a line plot has a single line, you can call it the x-axis because it's the horizontal line that's going to display our data. And notice I have already gone through and marked off where the numbers are. The intervals are equal. That means that there's equal spaces in between all of these. And also the numbers that are going to go on the bottom have to be equally spaced. So we already talked about it here that we're going to have an interval of 1, and we're going to start at 1, even though our egg collection, the lowest number is 3. But we're going to start at 1 and write our numbers right underneath where we're going to mark our X's, or however we're going to denote how many days this amount of eggs were collected. Well, 13, oh, just made it, 14 and 15, because we needed that 15 in order to show that on one day, those chickens produced a lot of eggs, 15 in one day. Okay, once we get this written down, we have to say what this represents. And so, you know, we were talking about egg collection, so I'm going to write number of eggs collected. Okay, and that tells me what these numbers represent. You have to really be careful when you're choosing what you want for your label on your axis. This is for a title, and they need to have titles. You might want to wait until you get yours organized to decide what your title is. Your title can be kind of funny, or it can just be straightforward. This, however, always has to be straightforward. This is the thing that's telling us what these numbers represent, and they represent the number of eggs that were collected. Okay, and so then we go back to our, I can put this over here instead. We go back to our chart where we organized our data. Really, we want to look at this chart right here. We go back to that and we see that there aren't any on 1, aren't any on 2, but there's 2 days in which we collected 3 eggs. So you can put X's, or you can put O's, or in this case, because we were collecting eggs, I thought it would be cute if we actually used eggs. And so, on day 3, we collected 2 eggs, and I'm going to put that right on the line. And there's my first egg. And then I'm gonna take another egg because there were 2 days. And I chose to do different color eggs. Okay, so for the second one, if there's ever 2, I'm gonna change the color. And then I can clearly see that there were 2 days that in the 2-week period that we collected just 3 eggs. And then I look back over here and it's 1. So it's 1 on day, it's 1 day that we collected 4 eggs. So again, I'm gonna stick it right there where it needs to be. Try to center it up. If you notice, I'm using the lines to help me. And you can do that too. If you have just notebook paper, you can turn it sideways and then the lines can help you as well. And then again, there was 1 day of the 2-week period that we got 5 eggs. So again, 1 day, 1 egg to denote that 1 day that we got 5 eggs. And then 6, collecting 6 eggs, there were 2 days in that 2-week period. So again, I'm putting this, and again, you can just use X's. There's no reason to do anything else except I wanted to make it a little brighter, make it a little fun. But when you do this, you're not going to do eggs, but when you make your line plot from your data, you can choose anything you'd like. You can make it fun, or you can use circles, or you can use X's like we did originally for our pencil. I just want to bring this back and show you originally. I don't know if you remember, but you came up and marked off very equal sized X's, and then it was really hard to see from the front of the room because these were posted in the back, so I went through and put in the dots for you. Okay, let's get back to this. Now, on 7, we have another 2 days where 7 eggs were collected. And so that's 1, and remember when I go to the next one, I've chosen to do a different color egg just so it's easy to count them. And it's easy to look at the graph and know exactly how many days that amount of eggs were collected. And you'll notice that they're the same size. And size is going to become important later on when we start looking at our data. So there was never a day where 8 eggs were collected. So then when we go on to 9, and there were 4. And so I'm starting with my 1 day color egg, and then my 2 day color egg, and then I have a 3 days, and finally 4 days that 9 eggs were collected. And that tells us something about the data that we'll talk about in another thing, in another video. But on 4 days, 9 eggs were collected. And then we keep going. On the 10th day, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't stand for days, that stands for eggs. So for 10 eggs being collected, there was only 1 day out of the 2 weeks that we were able to get 10 eggs. And then The last one we have is 15. And there was one very, very good day that 15 eggs were collected. And so that goes right over there. Let me take this down. And so we can see the egg collection for a 2-week period. Again, number of eggs collected, and then what would this axis, if it was here, really stand for? Does anybody know? I'm hoping that you said it would be the days, the number of days that amount of eggs were collected. All right, it's a pretty impressive looking plot. There's a few things I want to talk to you about on there, but before we do it, we need a title, because every graph needs a title. So, we can go back to what our data collection said, and our title could in fact be Egg Collection Per Day in a 2-week Period. That's a very serious title, but I think I'd rather say something about maybe just Our Hens Lay Eggs, or I wish I could think of something very clever. But I'll just put Our Egg Laying Hens. Okay? Our egg laying hens. So, this is our chart. This is our line plot, or again, some people call it a dot plot. And this is the final copy of what it's going to look like. You need to remember that the number of eggs stands for the number of days that amount of eggs were collected, so number of eggs collected. And then if we were to have an axis over here, this would be the number of days that amount of eggs were collected. So maybe I should put something in there. Our egg laying hens, I do want to say something in the title about 2 weeks. So I'm trying to figure out how to put that in. That's why we do all this work beforehand and we don't try to do it on the spot. Our egg laying hens. I don't know. Egg laying hens. For 2 weeks worth of breakfast. All right, that wasn't funny or clever, but I wanted to put something in there about 2-week period. Okay. All right. So that's our line plot, and you can go back and refer to it when you start doing your line plot. And you're going to be working on the number of pillows each of us has on our beds. And I will send you all that information from the Survey Monkey that we got. I believe 45 of you answered, so you're going to have 45 pieces of data for your chart. There's going to have to be a lot of organization. So I strongly suggest that you start off with something like this to try to arrange your data and make sure you have all the pieces. And then once your line plot is done, go back and count. So here it was for 2 weeks, so I should have 14 pieces of data on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And I did. So we're all set with that. Okay, boys and girls, when you do your line plots for this first time, they may not be perfect, But what's going to happen is I would like you to do them very neatly. And then when we have the Zoom classroom on Thursday, which you will be getting an invitation very soon, we're going to take a look at each other's and see how we can help each other to make them better. If they need to be. If they're great, that's perfect too. But we're going to kind of look at them to see how we put them together and do they have the information that they need to have. And I hope you can come up with a much clever or straightforward title than I did right there. All right, enjoy this beautiful day, and I'll see you on Thursday.